Good evening. My name's Professor Stephanie Barrientos. I'm with the Institute for Development Policy and Management and Brooks World Poverty Institute at the University of Manchester. And I just wanted to say a few words of welcome and to introduce the event this evening. Firstly, before I go too far, I think I should just say thank you very much to Social Responsibility at Manchester, who have funded this evening's event. Secondly, I think I should also say that having an event on garment manufacturing and production and conditions of workers in Manchester, and particularly in Manchester University, is a very correct and the right kind of event that we should be holding here, because Manchester is really the origins of the garment and textile industry, particularly following the Industrial Revolution in the UK and the rapid expansion of textiles and garments from the end of the 18th, but particularly during the 19th century. Manchester has a very, very long history, not only of the early development of the textile and garment industry, but also at that time of very poor working conditions. Very, very long hours. Men, women, and children worked in the garment and textile industries. And also was the origin of many of the movements to improve conditions for workers and to improve workers' rights. So it was also the home of the cooperative movement. And also the first trade union congress meeting was held in Manchester. Of course, as we know, history then moved on. With outsourcing and relocation, production then moved into developing countries. And Bangladesh became one of the main textile and garment manufacturers. It's the second largest exporter currently of garments in the world. It employs 3.5 million workers, 80% of them female. And so it's been a major source of income generation and of opportunity to work for workers that had often not had that kind of access. At the same time, there are many, many problems in terms of the working conditions for those workers. Many face poor workers' rights. They work very long hours, often producing the garments that we wear on a daily basis and that we buy in Europe and North America at very cheap rates. And of course, the collapse of the Rana Plaza building, which was one of many serious disasters in Bangladesh, but that was the key one, which really brought to the attention that there had to be fundamental and structural improvements in working conditions and the health and safety of workers. Over 1,000 workers died that day, and many more were seriously injured. You will hear a lot more about that later on, but really I just wanted to introduce the key activities of the evening. Firstly, we're going to hear from Professor Richard Locke, and I'll introduce him in a few minutes, and he's going to give a presentation. And Professor Locke he's the director of the Watson Institute for International Studies in the US, and has a long worked on initiatives to improve working conditions, but particularly private codes as well as public initiatives to improve working conditions and workers' rights. And he's also the author of a book which has now just disappeared off the screen, which is The Promise and Limits of Private Power, which has been published by Cambridge University Press last year. We will then follow that with a panel discussion, which is facilitated by Rosie Hurst, who is from Impact. Impact has worked for many, many years in many capacities, supporting companies, civil society initiatives, and others in terms of monitoring, but particularly also in terms of doing research and activities aimed at improving workers' rights. And the key theme of the evening is that to address the types of problems which are fundamental and structural problems, all key stakeholders have to work together. And it's not just those that are in the panel, which come from the garment sector, work with workers, the trade union, and a major UK retailer, but also us, because we are the consumers who buy the products and buy the garments. So the key theme is that we want to be buying with a conscience. We want to know that the garments we buy are enhancing the livelihoods of workers, and that all stakeholders need to work together to do it. Just to finalize before I finish, a couple of housekeeping points, and then I will introduce Professor Locke. Obviously, a key theme of the evening is the issues around health and safety. For those of who are here at the event, if there is no expected fire alarm, so if one goes off, it is a genuine alarm. And there are 2 exits. For those at the back of the room, exit through the back, and the stairs are towards the back where you came in. And then for those at the front of the room, exit at the front, and there's a fire exit set of stairs here. I should also say that we are being joined and should be welcoming those who are coming in through live stream, so that the audience for this event is far more than just in the room, and that they will also be hopefully participating through Twitter, and Barbara Evers is kindly managing the Twitter account, so that we can have some input later on in the discussion from the live stream. So welcome to everybody who's participating and joining us. And just finally, I would like to introduce Professor Richard Locke to give the keynote presentation.
Thank you very much, Stephanie, for that introduction, and thank you all for being here. It's wonderful to be able to be here in Manchester and to speak about some of my ongoing research, which focuses on labor justice in global supply chains. So let me just contextualize the work briefly, and then I'll give you some of the findings of the work that we've been doing. And this is contextualization that I think is not necessary given the audience, but as everyone knows, a little over a year ago in an industrial suburb in Dhaka, Bangladesh, a building housing various garment factories collapsed, killing over 1,000 workers, injuring many more. Most of these were young women, and it's considered the worst, if not one of the worst, industrial disasters on record. Now, what was particularly striking about the Rana Plaza factory accident was that it was avoidable, that cracks in the building walls and foundations were reported at least the day before, if not before then. The local police were told that about the building owner they should shut down the building. It was on the local news, so it wasn't like lack of information for what was going on. People knew that this was a serious risk. But the next morning, as hundreds of workers were milling around, hesitant to actually enter the building, some of the factory owners and managers and some of their security guards, sometimes holding bullhorns, other times sticks, basically threatened the workers to go back to work, basically arguing that if they didn't return to work, they risked their job. And these workers felt that they did not have a choice. They entered the building, they started their shift, and shortly thereafter, the building collapsed. Again, completely avoidable accident. Now, what I think is interesting about the Rana Plaza building collapse is that it's by no means a unique or rare incident. In fact, it has been preceded and even followed by other workplace disasters, not just in Bangladesh, but in just about every country that hosts supply chain operations. Just think about in 2012, the big scandal then were the worker suicides at Foxconn in southern China, where 24 workers who felt they were working too many hours with not enough break and not enough possibilities to earn decent wages took their lives. They threw themselves off the building roof rather than continue that situation. Now, what I think is especially interesting is that these more newsworthy incidents are in many ways dwarfed by the many more frequent but less spectacular terrible abuses that workers confront every day, whether it's excessive work hours or unsafe working conditions, poor pay, or sexual harassment, whether on the shop floor or coming back and forth to work. And this happens every single day. It's not reported in the press because it doesn't have this kind of dramatic incident, but these are pervasive conditions. And what my research seeks to do is understand what we can do to put an end to these abuses and promote just working conditions for the millions of workers who make the products that each one of us buys every single day. And the story that I want to tell is that, in fact, we can promote more just working conditions by pursuing certain very concrete steps. The first is, I think, that what we should focus on is less the sort of chasing the scandals and more trying to think about how do we build new capabilities within supply chain factories so that they can be both more efficient and more ethical workplaces. And I'll talk to you in a minute about what are those capabilities and how, in fact, it's within our reach to develop them. The second thing that I think is within our reach is to not focus merely on the conditions at the workplace, right? It's sort of like sometimes looking for your keys under the lamppost. But actually, we have to understand the whole dynamics up and down the supply chain and pay attention to what we normally call downstream business practices. In other words, product development, design, commercialization, purchasing practices, and how those practices that take place in headquarters, whether they're here in Europe or in the United States or other advanced industrial nations, those practices that we have a lot of control over actually in little and not so little ways actually push many of the kinds of problems that we see in the upstream, in the factory floor. So we need to address those. A third thing that I think we need to do is actually change our supply chain model. If the dominant supply chain model was let's have many suppliers scattered around the world because it looks like we could have unending supply of cheap labor, cheap transportation and logistics costs, no problems with externalities, we're not going to be having to pay for carbon or any other of these things, that world is changing, right? Transportation, logistics costs are going up, input costs are going up, unlimited supply of cheap labor is going down, and as a result, firms are, for their own reasons, struggling to reconfigure their supply chains. This creates an opportunity to try to build long-term, more trust-like relations between buyers and suppliers, and that can have a dramatic effect on workplace conditions. And last, but certainly not least, if we want to promote better working conditions in these supply chain factories, we have to bring the state back in. There is a lot that the private sector can do. And by private actors, I mean not just companies. I mean NGOs, multi-stakeholder initiatives, etc. The non-governmental actors can and should and will do a lot. But there are certain things, for example, enhancing and protecting enabling rights, the right of individual workers to form independent unions, to bargain collectively, etc. That is a citizenship right in many countries, and only the state has the legitimacy and actually the responsibility to enforce those rights. So those are the 4 key points that I want to talk about a little bit this afternoon and try to show you that this is actually doable. It's not a pipe dream. This is actually happening already in certain supply chains around the world, and I think we can learn from them. And I know that the panelists, a number of the panelists will be able to elaborate on some of these points. So before I get into elaborating on these points, let me tell you a little bit about how I came to these conclusions. For the last 10 years, with a group of really terrific graduate students, I have been studying labor conditions in different supply chains. And I've been basically working with different global brands like Nike, Coca-Cola, Hewlett-Packard, Apple, etc., basically trying to understand their supply chains and trying to understand what's going on in terms of the working conditions in their suppliers. This was all independently financed. All we asked for the companies was their data and their access. And the idea was to look at different kinds of industries and different kinds of companies so we could control for different kinds of governance mechanisms or supply chain dynamics to see, are there something particular to Nike as opposed to Apple or Coca-Cola? And it turns out that they're remarkably similar in the terms of their challenges that they face. And what we were able to do is convince these companies to share with us every single one of their audits of their supply chain factories. So to give you a sense of that, Nike has about 900 suppliers located in 50 countries, and we had every single audit that was ever done of their suppliers from 2002 until 2012. Right? So we looked at all of these audits, and these audits don't come in nice spreadsheets, right? They come in these reports that have lots of different items. They're often not fully filled out, so we had to read them, code them, analyze them, and it was interesting that this was a gift we gave to the companies because they had actually never systematically looked at their audits across space, across time, et cetera. We also got their sourcing database, and the sourcing database is simply descriptions of where are these factories located, who owns them, how big are they, how big they are, how old they are, what kinds of products they make, because we wanted to basically compare a set of descriptive characteristics. Old versus new factories, factories located in country A as opposed to country B, making high-end products as opposed to simple T-shirts, and we wanted to see, is that what were those structural features doing in terms of driving the outcomes? But once we did a series of analyses looking at worker outcomes, getting at that from the audit reports, and regressing those against the sourcing database, we saw certain kinds of associations, but we really wanted to understand what was driving them. And so with these different teams of students, we went to 10 different countries, some of the leading countries hosting these supply chains, visited over 150 unique factories, and conducted over 800 interviews with supply chain managers, with purchasing managers, with NGOs, et cetera. So it was this combination of a lot of quantitative analysis with rich qualitative work and field research that allowed us to come to these conclusions. So what did we learn? Well, I think that there are basically 4 basic lessons that came out of our research. The first one was that the dominant approach that both companies and labor rights NGOs seek to use to try to address these issues, which I call the private compliance approach, which is companies announce a code of conduct, then they ask their suppliers to sign on to the code of conduct, and then they audit the factories to see if they're in compliance to the code of conduct. If they're not, they're supposed to come up with a remediation plan. If everything goes well, then they're supposed to improve things. If they don't go so well, then supposedly they will pull out of the factory or threaten to pull out of the factory. That's the dominant approach, right? That's what most companies do. That's what most NGOs ask the companies to do. And that has actually really limited impact. I'm not saying it doesn't have any impact. I wouldn't be able to say that because I've only been able to study factories that are already engaged in compliance programs. But after studying companies in very different industries, operating in very different countries, over time with different kinds of products, what I can see is that these factories improve up to a certain level, but then they kind of stagnate. They never continue to improve, and sometimes they actually go down. So that's the first thing, and I think that's important for us to know. I'm not saying that we shouldn't go into factories and inspect them and collect information, et cetera. I just think that information gathering alone is not going to change the behaviors that we need. All right, so that's the first important point. The second one is this capability building story that I mentioned earlier. And one of the things that we realized is that many of the managers of these supply chain factories, they're not evil people who have to be sort of policed ever more rigorously or creatively or frequently, et cetera. Most of them are decent people trying to do the best they can under very, very difficult circumstances. And most of them were never trained in modern management techniques. And so what you see is that they were often, these managers were really good workers on their shop floor, some of whom got promoted to be line supervisors, and some of them ended up getting promoted to be plant managers, and suddenly they were plant managers in Taiwan and they find themselves managing a plant in Guatemala, Vietnam, or southern China. No one ever taught them inventory management and how they could actually save all sorts of money if they actually had visibility in their inventory and could use it when they needed it. No one ever taught them how they need to align their production orders with their personnel plan so that they have workers when they have the orders, as opposed to having the workers there when they don't have the orders, and the orders come in and they have to keep them there overtime just to make the order. No one ever taught them how to reorganize their shop floor so they could gain efficiencies and improve their quality, so that they don't have to rely on cheaper wages and longer hours simply to be competitive or to make the order. But when you provide this kind of training to these managers, and I can provide data later on if you want, one can see not only do they improve their quality and efficiency, but we also see improvements in working conditions. By the way, I'm not saying that it's a simple thing, like it's a technocratic solution. We buy the software, or we put it into our computer, suddenly everything's good. These new capabilities are necessary but not sufficient. Once you have the greater gains from efficiencies and quality, et cetera, how you distribute those gains is fundamentally a political issue between the buyers and suppliers and between the supply chain managers and their workforces. And those issues really vary. The third conclusion is this thing that I talked about in terms of downstream business practices. What struck us doing this research over 10 years and across these different industries is that all sorts of what appear to be little delays or small changes by the buyers on their end have almost a bullwhip effect in terms of their consequences downstream, upstream in the factory. For example, what you often see is that orders are being placed in the factories often above the known capacity of the plant. If the plant can only make 20,000 pair of running shoes a month, you'll see often the orders will be 22 or 25,000 pair. If the orders have to be placed 11 weeks or 11 and a half weeks before shipping, it's interesting that you often see that these orders are not placed at that time, but often 10 weeks or 9.5 weeks, and then they're changed. What should have been an order of 20,000 pair of black running shorts suddenly becomes 15,000 black running shorts and 5,000 red or something like that. And those would appear to be small changes, have incredible consequences in the factories, because suddenly those factories have to buy these new materials. They have to make do with what they have. They're not suddenly going to run out and buy, hire a lot of new workers or build new plant. The only way that they can actually make the order is by having the workers stay longer hours and overworking them. And because they got the order late, but they know that if they don't deliver the order on time, they will never get another one. And so what they end up doing is air shipping instead of using traditional freight, and they eat the difference, which means that their ability to actually pay for greater wages or better working conditions is diminished. Those things can be fixed in the same way that we can think about capability building on the factory floor. We can do capability building in headquarters to make sure that market forecasting, product development, design, commercialization, purchasing practices can be improved. And those improvements will have significant consequences for workers in the factories. And finally, as I said before, there's no substitute for the state. That there are certain labor rights, which I see as citizenship rights, that only the state can do. Now, bringing back the state doesn't mean trying to reinvent or somehow romanticize a former image of what the state could or could not do in terms of a command and control deterrence model of regulation. What we're beginning to see in those cases where we really see progress are interesting collaborations, experiments, pilots between private actors and public actors working together to try to improve health and safety standards, labor standards, environmental standards. That collaboration is important for a variety of reasons. One, because no actor alone can simply solve such a complex issue. And two, because even the state needs capability building, as we see from some of the most egregious example. And giving those capabilities is very important, and those capabilities are often gained through this kind of interaction between the public and private, et cetera. So what I want to conclude with is we live in an extremely messy world where the Rana Plaza incidences, unfortunately, are way too frequent. And even more frequent are those incidents that we never read about, but that happen every single day and are in fact as pernicious, if not more, to the workers who are making the goods that we buy every day. But there is a lot that we can do. And I've just suggested 4 of those proposals, and I'm happy to discuss them with my panelists later on in the session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard. That was extremely interesting. Is that working? Firstly, to introduce myself, I'm Rosie Hurst, and my company Impact has been working on these issues, in fact coming across some very, very similar conclusions to you for the past 17 years. And I'm joined on the panel by some real Bangladesh experts here. We have Shafiq Hassan, who is, I think, probably the most enlightened factory owner I've ever met. And I hope will be able to dispel some of the myths, I think, that we all tend to hold. Also very honoured to be joined by Shamima Sultana, who is from Awaj Foundation and who works on a daily basis with garment workers in the slums, at home, as well as being in factories. Jenny Holcroft, who has got an incredibly important title, Director of Everything, Monarch of All You Survey at Industrial, the global union. It is Monarch of All You Survey, I think, and it is now. Industrial, obviously, making enormous strides in organising, and particularly in the garment sector in Bangladesh right now. And Adil Rahman from Next, who has bravely stepped forward to talk, I think, a little bit about the retailer point of view. But before I go any further, I'd like to find out who you are. Put your hand up if you are in some way connected with the university. Oh, that's most people. Okay, so put your hands down. Everybody else, put your hand up if you're connected with an NGO. Okay, good. Very good. What about trade union? Anyone from a trade union? You're alone. Khalid, you're also from a trade union. Excellent, very good indeed. What about a member of the public, a customer? All of you, yeah. What about someone from a government? We're joined by the Deputy High Commissioner of Bangladesh, who's going to be talking to us a little bit later. Anybody else that I've missed out? Who are you? A sustainability consultant. Excellent. So we have a sustainability consultant or expert possibly in this field. Very good. Anybody else? Garment industry people. Now, isn't that interesting? Because we haven't got much of a garment industry anymore. And I think that plays to the point you were making about the jobs having gone overseas and maybe not all the expertise that's needed to make those jobs good jobs having gone with those jobs. Okay, now I'm just going to ask one more question before we get started, which is, I'd like you just to think quickly about the question, I believe buying garments from Bangladesh is a good thing. So can you stand up if you believe that buying garments from Bangladesh is a good thing? No, panel, sit down, please. Okay, and it's nearly everyone, but not absolutely everybody. Very good, thank you very much indeed. Sit down. Can I ask you to stand up if you believe that buying garments from Bangladesh is not a good thing? Stand up if you believe it is not a good thing. Oh, shyness. Or if you're not sure, stand up. Okay, so we've got some undecideds. Excellent. No, it's just good to see because we hear so much in the newspapers and we don't have enough information to make up our own minds, and I hope we'll be able to do something about that today. So, I was just going to give you a quick rundown, and thank you both, and thank you, Stephanie, for having given some key facts at the beginning. I'll just give a few other facts. I think one thing that's very important to remember about Bangladesh is just how important the garment industry is to Bangladesh. And I think this explains quite a lot why production is so paramount, why it seems like a sensible idea to ask people to go back into a dangerous building, because the very future of the country depends on that production. To give you some idea, garment exports are worth 86% of export earnings. Now that is an extraordinary dependency. It's 12% of GDP, 4 million people directly employed, 25 million people supported by those people, which is 17% of the population. So this is not a trivial matter for Bangladesh at all. I'd also like to say that I have seen also the benefits of the garment industry to workers in their homes. So, for example, if you went into the slums in Dhaka 6-7 years ago, you'd go into little slum houses. There would be no electricity. There would be maybe a bed. There would be no furniture. People would have their things in plastic bags hanging from hooks on the ceiling. If I go now into the homes of people who work at that level of the industry, there is usually electricity, there's usually a fan, am I not right? There's a fridge, there's a bit of furniture to put things on. So there are things that make life better and which mean that people are more worthy of respect, and that is something we should also remember. But we've heard about the fires, we've heard about the building collapses, we've heard that this is an everyday thing. There have been 150 fires over the past 20 months, some small, some large, but so to your point, this is not an isolated incident. Also, we have very low wages. We have malnutrition amongst the workforce because there's not enough either time to cook, because people work such long hours, or enough money to buy what needs to be bought. Harsh treatment is very commonplace. Lathis, sticks, are often used. And also, certainly in the factories that we visited over the last few years, there have been no factories in which workers have said there was an active trade union that could represent their views. Now, I hope very much that that's changing now, but that's certainly been the case for some time. So what's been happening? Well, I think the things that have been happening in Bangladesh are extremely exciting. We've seen, and you will have read about this, I'm sure, the Bangladesh Accord on Fire Safety, and I will stop in a minute, Bangladesh Accord on Fire Safety, which is an unprecedented coalition of hundreds of brands, trade unions, with NGOs also acting as, I suppose, witnesses to that affair. And they are really starting to make a difference in Bangladesh, and I hope very much we'll hear some more about that. Also, the Better Work programme is moving into Bangladesh, looking at social dialogue in the workplace. There are many initiatives on productivity, on efficiency, on improving HR management skills. So there's an awful lot going on. And the question is it enough? So I'd like to start by asking each member of the panel to say, what has all this got to do with you, Shafiq Hassan?
Hello, everyone. I don't know whether I can live up to Rose's adjective and reputation that she's given me, but I'll tell you a bit of a small story about me. After I did my master's at Aston University in Birmingham in 1983, I went back to Bangladesh and I worked for BRAC for 2 years. I came back to do my PhD at Aston, and 2 weeks before I joined, a friend of mine said to me that, listen, this is 1985, you know, in Bangladesh, garments industries are happening. What about it, you know? I said, no, I want to do my PhD. I'm not a business person. I don't understand business. Why would I go and do that? 2 weeks I couldn't sleep. 3 o'clock in the morning, can't sleep, penny drops. You know, it's much more important to create employment for women in Bangladesh than actually doing a PhD. So I go back to Bangladesh. I work in a garment factory, and I realized at that time that lots of buyers are coming into Bangladesh. They're selling fabric, running away, and garments are actually becoming bankrupt because they're landed with fabric they don't know what to do with. So I decided in my own heart that, listen, I'm not going to do a factory, but I'm going to get into marketing. So I've done that until 2004. I still do that, but in 2004, I started to get into manufacturing. So here I am as a garment factory owner, as someone who's got a design operation in London. So we do design to delivery through our companies EcoSourcing and Ecotex.
Okay, now, Shamima, tell us about you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Shamima Sultana. I am working with the Awaj Foundation. It's a Bangladeshi NGOs. We are working for the workers. Our main working area who are working in the garments industries, and we are our organization always try to improve their working conditions and improve their productivity also. We have provided many awareness training. Training is our main working area for the workers in development, and I am working with the Awaj Foundations more than 3 years, and I am working for workers, garments workers, more than 7 years because I am in these development sections. I am working 7 years. Thank you.
Jenny.
Hi, my name's Jenny Holdcroft. I'm from Industrial Global Union, which represents workers in 14 industrial sectors, of which electronics is one and the garment sector is another, and those are our two key supply chain industries. We've got about 50 million members throughout the world through the national unions that affiliate to us, and we have a number of Bangladeshi unions that are our members, and they're formed into an organisation called the Industrial Bangladesh Council, and I'll go into much more detail in a moment about what needs to happen with the trade unions on the ground in Bangladesh. Our organisation has signed the Accord on Fire and Building Safety with 174 global garment brands now, and perhaps when we can go into a little bit of detail about what the accord means, not only for Bangladesh, but for the whole issue of monitoring and improving workers' conditions in supply chains.
Hello everyone, I'm Adil, I'm the bad guy, no I'm joking. I work for Next, I'm the program manager for Next, and at Next we have around 45 people who work solely on corporate social responsibility. I'm in charge of the kind of program work, and what that entails is ensuring that strategic kind of coordination around certain issues, as we're hearing, for example, freedom of association, wages, etc., in certain countries, but working and building relationships with the unions, the NGOs, government, and particularly with other brands as well, because if you're going to make a difference, then you have to do it together. Otherwise, it's one factory at a time, which is not going to change anything. So that's what I do.
I think I'm going to actually stick with you, Adil, and ask you. So you buy from how many countries in the world?
42.
42.
Yeah.
And how big's Bangladesh for you?
It's very big. It's I think it's the 5th or 6th.
Yeah,
biggest,
biggest for you.
Yeah.
And what is it that attracts you to Bangladesh, commercially speaking?
Commercially speaking, Bangladesh has, well, actually, I suppose, to be very honest, the ready-made garment industry is a labour-intensive industry. You guys do not know how much effort goes into, even a t-shirt. It's a lot of work. And Bangladesh provides low cost, low wages, and readily available labour force, and to meet that global requirement.
And it's interesting because, of course, last year the minimum wage went up in Bangladesh by 80%. It's one of the things that happened in the wake of Rana Plaza, which actually means that now Bangladesh, in terms of labour, is more expensive than Myanmar, and it's actually a little bit more expensive than Tirupur in South India for garments. Does that affect the way you look at Bangladesh?
I suppose about even 5 years ago, where I think brands were quite willing to kind of jump ship for a penny. I think those days are long gone, and I think Richard mentioned the fact that now it is about ensuring that you've got sustainable supply coming in. You ensure that you've built relationship with suppliers, and obviously, and in Bangladesh, the garment industry is huge. We know that there's a lot of capacity there to be able to get that product, all the woven, all the t-shirts, etc. But also, the infrastructure that for example, Myanmar, there isn't the infrastructure. You've got all the other kind of US and etc. swamping it. But also, we've invested in Bangladesh. If you think about it, we have a sourcing office in Bangladesh that supplies 70% of our sourcing from Bangladesh. That's a big investment for Next. So it's not that you're just going to pick up all of that in the last 10 to 15 years and then just go and shift that somewhere else.
And that, I'm sure, is a big relief to workers. I mean, when you talk to workers about what it was like before Rana Plaza, what is it like now, Do they worry that they're going to lose their jobs because the brands are frightened and are going to pull out, do you think?
Yeah, just I want to share one story of our Rana Plaza workers. Before few days ago, I met with him named Alia. Alia actually was working in the Rana Plaza. Alia is a worker's name actually, and she was working in a Rana Plaza, and she was blocked 2 days. 2 days in Rana Plaza collapse. After 2 days, she was rescued. Fortunately, she was very well. Just she felt traumatic few minutes. After 10 months, again she will started their job. Again she will started nearest the Rana Plaza factories. When I met with you, I asked a question: why you are again join and another garments industries? Then she answered me, actually, I have 2 daughters and I have a parents and my father-in-law and all the members, family members are dependent on me, and my husband is a rickshaw puller. He cannot bring all the liabilities alone. That is why I started this job. Again, I started in the factory my careers. But now, also she answered me, but now, before the joining these garments industries, I get some information from the workers who are working these garments. I just asked these workers, what is the working conditions, how much working load, production rate, and safety issues, and how the communication challenge with mid-level management or workers, and how to bargaining power. Now I am joining these factories because I know from these workers and get the information that this factory is well secured and working condition is good. That is why I joined this factory. Actually, this is the fact. Our workers are very needy and they have no options because they are only one skilled. For these garment industries, they have no skilled another work. They have no option actually. Of course, they are aware about their safety, but simultaneously they are aware they are losing their job. If they are losing their job, their family was messy. They are spoiled. Whole the family nothing eat food. Their baby cannot go to school. This is the fact. But reality is there. Our workers have changed after Rana Plaza. Our workers now thinking what is their rights, what is their responsibilities, and what is the safety issues. How to ensure their safety issues, how to raise their voice. This is the fact, and this is the big change. I think this is the big change of our workers for our workers. Now our workers thinking their rights, their safety, and if ensure that, then they again better work for the. If more buying from Bangladesh, we are get together. We hope we are get better something for the workers and our industries. Thank you.
Thank you, Shamina. I'm just going to turn to you, looking at this from Geneva. I mean, that's great. That's great news hearing that. So there's more of a groundswell there. What changes have you noticed over the period from before Rana Plaza to now?
Well, I think obviously Rana Plaza was a huge wake-up call, and while it's shocking and dreadful that so many workers lost their lives, it gives us a responsibility to make the best use of that we can, because as Richard pointed out, most of the abuses that you see in supply chains don't make headlines around the world. It's just that everyday silent abuse that goes on. It's very hard to address. But we've been able to use that global momentum, and Shamima has said already what the effect on the ground in Bangladesh has been. It's also clearly resonated around the world as well, and it's given us an opportunity to do something different. And what Richard was saying about really this compliance model of the past has not really delivered where it should. And Adol said, there are real limitations to what a single brand acting alone can do. What the Accord has done is taken all of that learning and it seized that opportunity and turned it into into something that will really start to address the systematic problems in supply chains. And key to that, obviously, well, perhaps not obviously in all cases, is the involvement of trade unions. Because if workers like the ones that Shamima is working with are not empowered in their own workplaces, firstly, to refuse to enter a workplace, and we heard about what happened in Rana Plaza when they were forced in, you need a union, the strength of a union, to be able to enforce your right not to work in unsafe conditions, but also for workers to seize back that power and start to say, we want better wages, we want better working conditions, we don't want to be worked into the ground. So I think even now there is a realization among brands at least that unions are essential to the piece. So what the Accord has tried to do is bring all of that knowledge and understanding together. The other key piece that Rosie started to allude to was about the commitment of brands to stay in Bangladesh. And this is obviously important to the factory owners, to the government, to the workers themselves, that the jobs will stay. And I think that fear of, oh my goodness, it's all too hard, we'll just pull out and we'll leave this to somebody else who doesn't have the principles that we have, that is over. And everybody's recognizing that the commitment to stay is the only way that you can start to build a sustainable industry. So that's written into the fabric of the Accord, that when the brands, and that's 174 of them, sign it, they say, we're committed to Bangladesh, we're going to stay there, we're going to make sure that trade unions have the space to operate, that workers can start to be part of the decision making in their factories that will strengthen them. And that's what we're starting to see now.
But Shafiq, you're there, trying to be a good employer. How does all of this affect you?
Okay.
A new employer, I should say. How many people do you employ? 8,500?
7.5.
7,500. So a significant employer.
First of all, what I'd like to actually say, Rose, is it is absolutely unacceptable for anyone, anywhere in Bangladesh to die to make any basic changes to the industry. It's just, I feel it's a collective failure from the a trading body, from the garment owner's side. I feel it's a failure, a bit of responsibility goes to the buyer on the supply and demand side. But most of all, what Richard actually touched, okay, I think it's a massive failure of governance in Bangladesh as it is. Because the thing is, the regulatory body actually doesn't exist. I mean, everything that actually happens, if you look at whether you, I mean, if you look at Tazreen, what actually happened there? People can't get out, there's a fire, okay? So it's basic principles which are not working. Rana Plaza, I'll have to be in a way frank, because it's actually, it's angers me and frustrates me. It's not just me. Anyone who is sensible in Bangladesh dealing with this industry, they get frustrated and they get angry as to what is going on in that country. How is it possible for someone like Sohail Rana to possess someone else's property by force? He gets permission to build a 4-storied building. He puts another 5, okay? And that won't collapse, okay? At Rana Plaza, people were pushed in. It's lack of basic due diligence. You can save those people. It's absolute criminality that actually goes on, okay? I sit on the, I'm a member of board at BRAC International.
Could you
and
perhaps
I'll
explain what BRAC is for you don't?
BRAC is, some of you might know, is one of the world's largest NGO, okay? BRAC has a bank, and it had one of the main branches in Sabah was there. The day before, when all the hullabaloo was going on, and we knew it's a problem, we moved all our assets, they moved all the staff, no staff was allowed to go in there, whereas at Rana Plaza, everyone forced people into something which was going to actually kill them. It's completely unacceptable. It's a national tragedy. It's a national failure. It's just absolutely calamitous. If Rana Plaza isn't going to change anything, nothing else is going to actually do it. So in a way, I mean, the thing is, I mean, Rana Plaza needn't happen. But if the basic governance of Bangladesh doesn't change, okay, what is going to happen? So what has actually happened is, which is positive, is that we've got private governance now coming in through Accord and Alliance. right? And it has got to be implemented, almost through the back door, because the government, A, probably doesn't have the will to do anything. It doesn't have the capacity to do anything, But the thing is, luckily now, for the first time ever, it in a way has been imposed from outside, because Bangladesh is a critical mass for the apparel industry. So buyers are putting their hands into their pocket. They're coming together for the first time and making something actually happen. I remember on the 8th of May, after I came back from Bangladesh, when Rana Plaza happened, I remember I was talking to the managers of the retail chains that we work with, and I said to them that, listen, whether it's New Look, whether it's Primark, whether it's Sainsbury's, whether it's H&M, you cannot do anything on your own. It's got to be a collective measure, and basically that is what is actually happening. So I'm really glad about that. It's Bangladesh, to run an industry from Bangladesh, it's not an easy place. But 2013 was absolutely hell for us. 2012 ended with Tazreen. In May, we've got Rana Plaza. I mean, you cannot we are just continuously thinking in the industry, what's going to be next? What disaster are we going to face? And who is going to be accountable for this, okay? I mean, 3 days ago, we had a ship that sank in Meghna, okay? 50 people have died, another 10 people are actually missing, okay? It happens every single year. Who takes responsibility for it, okay? It's collective responsibility, it's no one's responsibility. Is the shipping manager in Bangladesh going to resign? The Prime Minister of Korea resigned. It becomes a national disaster. I mean, what is happening in Bangladesh? No one takes responsibility. Who is accountable? Nobody is accountable, For the first time in history of Bangladesh's disasters in the garment sector, after having those international pressures, we've got some people who are behind bars, okay? And the Tazreen managing director was put behind bars a month ago, okay? There is, no one is accountable for anything. But the thing is, no one has to die to make changes in Bangladesh in this industry. But unfortunately, it's happening, and I can't say whether with Accord and Alliance working, whether next thing isn't going to happen, because between them, there are only 2,000 factories they're investigating. They're looking into 2,000 factories. What about the balance 3,000, which are probably the pits? So, but at least we've moved in a positive direction. Working in Bangladesh as a factory owner, I've been in this game, as I've said to you, for about 30 years. I've been manufacturing for about 8 years. Energy, there is an issue. So we have to generate our own electricity. We have got to invest in generators ourselves, okay? Infrastructure is completely underdeveloped, okay? You've got a rule of law doesn't exist. Criminality is everywhere, okay? And then you have got bank interest rate, a compound interest rate of between 70 to 20%. We are actually really, when I sometimes think about it, I think we are working for the banks. I suppose we're working for the banks everywhere around the globe. But in Bangladesh, it's between 17 to 20% compound interest. It's crazy. It's a hard place to make ends meet. But I can see some positive things that are actually happening. The thing about Bangladesh, I just want to add, Rosie, taking a bit more longer than you thought I would, is this. The garment industry has been a social and economic driver. Okay? When I got into this industry in 1985, I remember the condition of what Bangladesh's villages were like. You go and see in this 30 years, there's been an unbelievable transformation. Bangladesh as a whole, on the Millennium Development Goals, it has actually surpassed India, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, a lot of the other countries at that level. It's been remarkable in education, healthcare, possibly mainly due to the NGOs like BRAC and Grameen Bank, and a bit of help from the government and foreign donors. But the thing is, the garment industry has played a significant role in empowerment of women, and we've got to salute that. The women who work in our factory, I tell them that they are the jewel in the crown for our industry. We applaud them. We as a company, in this discussion, I'll tell you how we look after them. A lot of people are actually looking after them. There are a lot of negatives, but I think with Accord and Alliance, we are moving forward.
Thank you very much, Shafiq. Now, I would just want to open up to the floor for comments and questions. Now, what we need to do is scurry about with some microphones. We've got to use it. Okay, so I'm going to distribute this one. So, any questions, any comments? Lady at the back with the pink glasses.
Thank you. It's been really interesting so far, and I was just wondering if...
Could you introduce yourself?
Oh, sorry, yeah. My name is Sarah Callock, and I'm a PhD student here at the University of Manchester in politics. And I study gender, and I'm interested in... I would like it if the panel could elaborate a bit on the role of gender in labor places, and maybe the specific... you mentioned earlier about there's an abundance of sort of sexual harassment. And did anything crop up in the research that shows what could be done to address that specifically and address the gendered element of this situation?
Fantastic.
Thanks.
Shall I take another question as well, if there is one floating about? Lady in the... Oh, yes. Oh, gosh, can we have them from our patient people on the live feed who've been super patient?
This is from the live feed. They would like you, it's Constant G, to talk about the alliance and what is happening with American brands. And there are also a couple of questions about what responsible consumerism can do and what are its strengths and weaknesses.
Okay, who would like to talk about gender? Go on, Jenny, go on.
Yes, I think we all want to talk about gender, subject very dear to my own heart. Yes, obviously these are young women workers, and that is not a insignificant issue. From a trade union perspective, it's a huge challenge, because what we see is where there are trade unions, the trade unions are led by men. Also in the factories, I think it's a big challenge, because historically supervisors, line managers have also been men. I think what I'm seeing in Bangladesh now is women stepping up and actually being given the opportunity to become supervisors. I think there's a big challenge in the unions for that also to happen as well. And we didn't touch on the unions, so maybe I can take the opportunity of this question to do that. The union situation in Bangladesh is very, very bad. Unions used to be entirely banned from the industry. The ban has now been lifted, so they are able to form themselves, but that's very slow to happen. They're very, very divided. They're linked to the political parties and are very much political organisations in many cases, rather than organisations working for the rights of workers, and that needs to be turned around. So we're working with a solid core group of unions who are interested in organising, who have women also as leaders, and that's a very essential part of it, because we want these to be proper democratic, independent unions that are capable of representing the interests of their workers. But I think the whole issue of gender absolutely permeates everything that is happening in Bangladesh. People are very, very conscious of it, very conscious for the need for women to be empowered as they are economically through the very work that they're doing, but also to represent their own interests through the trade unions. So thanks for the question.
Would anyone like to add on gender? Like to maybe talk a little bit about the UP project, perhaps?
I want to share a little bit. Actually, Awaj Foundation always working for the workers and workers improvement, and we are working community based and also inside of the factories. Actually, malnutrition and financial management is the big issues for our workers. 85% women workers are working in our garments industries, and most of the people are coming from the countryside, and their knowledge, their education knowledge and also their knowledge is very poor. Sometimes they are scared actually how to balance their financial management, how to take the food, or what type of food, their nutrition. Malnutrition is the big problem for our female workers actually, and in that case our foundations in community base to help the women's workers, especially women's workers. One things I will actually I want to share with you. Our foundation maintain 12 women's cafes. Women cafes means where women or garments workers after their work are engage them, and they are learn some things about their health, about their financial management, and about their rights and responsibilities also. And it's a very interesting things. They aware about their rights and responsibilities, and on labor law, Bangladesh labor law, and how to manage their financial management, how to manage their health and food attitude. Actually, they are learn about through a game. It's a Ludo. Ludo is a very traditional and very interesting game for Bangladesh, and our workers learn through this game. It's a very interesting things, and they are day by day about their rights and responsibilities, about their financial management, intergenerating income source, and they are trained up their food habit. Actually, it's also our foundation provide healthcare services for the community base, and wages is the big issues for our workers, for our garments industries. But when wages was increased simultaneously, every cost will be increased. Their housing rate is increased, their fooding rate is increased, children education rate is increased. They have managed everything increased 10 to 20%, $20. This is the main things. We have to work their residents. Now we have to work together how to develop their community and how to develop their life. Actually, if now one workers get $100, but increase their $20, they get now to $120. But simultaneously, their housing rate more than 5% increase, their fooding cost 5% increase, their child education cost 5% increase. Now, how to balance? Already they have gap $10. Then when our workers can balance, they reduce their working conditions, they reduce their food habit. It is the big challenge actually. If we work together to develop our worker life, like housing, like transportations, pure drinking in their community, healthcare service, it would be very helpful for our workers, I think. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Who wants to take that question about the alliance? Oh, I've got nobody who wants to put it. No, you have to. You have to. Okay.
When the accord was agreed between a core group of the initial 35 brands, I mentioned before it has some very important elements about maintaining the brand's commitment to factories in Bangladesh, involving workers and their trade unions in monitoring their health and safety standards, independent inspections that are divorced from the previous practices of the brands, commitment about paying for remediation of factories. All of these elements were in there. There was another group of brands that didn't want to sign that, but also wanted to be seen to be doing something, and they created the alliance. And this has been very undermining for the Accord's work. I have to be honest here, because a lot of the time we are asked this question, the Accord and the Alliance, they need to work together. The commitment made by the brands who signed the Accord is way, way, way beyond the commitment made by the brands who joined the Alliance. And you've got Walmart and you've got Gap as the lead brands there. And they have not made those same commitments. So for us, it's a bit of a smoke and mirrors exercise to make it look as if they're doing something, but it's basically business as usual. They're just doing it together, but it's the same sort of compliance model of the past. It doesn't have any of the groundbreaking, revolutionary measures that the Accord has. And it's very difficult to say this because then we're seen as criticising the Alliance. And I don't want to criticise anybody, but the facts on paper are that they are very, very different initiatives. It has a far lower level of commitment. But we have, to the extent possible, made sure that we are applying the same standard to the factories. And I think that's the most important thing that we can do. But beyond that, people need to understand that they are very, very different initiatives. And the Accord has got 174 brands. We've got 80% of the production. We cover 1,600 factories. The alliance is tiny by comparison. So I think that's enough said about that.
And I'm going to hold the consumer question just for a little bit longer. There was a lady in the middle who wanted to ask a question.
Actually, it was answered when I
Very good.
answered it earlier on. I was wanting to say more about the role of the trade unions, which
Well,
you went on to answer.
Excellent, very good indeed. Any more questions? Lady in the front row. Actually, why don't we take the lady there and then the lady in the front row, if that's okay? Just to save the legs of the microphone person.
Good
Hi,
evening.
who are you?
This is Samia. I'm doing PhD in Manchester Business School. And I'm doing PhD on the garments industry of Bangladesh. I'm from Bangladesh, actually. So I just came from my data collection last month. And what I have seen that the Accord is actually working very nicely with the factories to sort out these working conditions and the building safety issues. But there are some rising problems coming up with the emergence of Accord as well. For example, for the small factories, when Accord visits to those factories, and they find some problem in that, they just shut down the factory all of a sudden, and then from next day all the workers lose job. And if you go to the industrial zone of Bangladesh, you will see a lot of people are unemployed, roaming around searching for a job. So I mean, for myself, it's the question that what will be the implication of this? If I mean, Accord is obviously good, but for the small factories, all of a sudden they cannot change because it's been there for long years. And also regarding the trade union, as you have said, that trade unions are politically affiliated. So how good this trade union could be for Bangladeshi garments factories and for the good of the workers?
Okay, so two great questions there. But I'm going to go to the lady in red at the front next, and the microphone is just coming towards you now. Who are you? Or have you got stuff from Twitter?
Yes, it's Twitter updates here. A couple of questions.
Exciting, isn't it?
Okay,
Thank you everyone for carrying on watching. By the
Brilliant.
way.
So we've got two questions. The first one is how do issues of race between the factory owners and workers have an effect on working conditions? So yes, indeed. That's the first one from Yubin Kang. And secondly, just one that's just come in now. We wanted you to just speak a little bit about protests in the last year since the disaster and how this has impacted the industry.
Oh, very interesting. And I want to go to Gunelli, who's been very patient as well, who's over there. Unusually patient, I'd say.
Patient, yeah. Hi, I am Gunelli Winum. I now work in my own consultancy with supplier training. And before that, I've been working with the Ethical Trading Initiative in Norway for 13 years. So I've been involved in supplier capacity building. I've been involved in purchasing practices. I've been involved in many parts of this. And just to start with the promotion first, thank you so much, Richard Locke. I couldn't agree more that the purchasing practices is an essential part of the problem. And I just want to quickly promote a new report where we have actually interviewed and had discussions with 1,500 suppliers, the supply level, in India, in China, in Vietnam, and we also have some stories from Bangladesh. They all say the same. All the managers say the same. Lead times are going down, prices are going down, our costs are going up. So what is then one of the main problems is that we actually are the global trade is in a current situation that there is some kind of a black box. There is nobody, neither buyer nor supplier. I claim this after talking to 1,500 suppliers, and my privilege has been that I talk to them without the buyers present. So they are much more open, yeah. So I would claim that nobody yet knows the actual costs of producing this shirt that is sufficient to cover the cost of decent working conditions. Because there is in this price negotiation, the prices are set by the perceived shelf prices from the buyer's perspective. So I'm very, very interested to hear more of a consumer input of all this. That's the one thing. I only have one copy, so you have to ask me for another copy if you want. I'm on my way to India and Bangladesh. The other thing is that I'm also quite often in Bangladesh. I live in Delhi, so I swap over. And I would like to ask you from the sector, what I hear from those non-ethical trade CSR people is that there is a increased sourcing to Pakistan on behalf of Bangladesh. And I would like to hear your impression about that. Because what other textile actors tell me that the sourcing is swifting over to Pakistan. That's the second thing. And the third is that there is really one big issue with Bangladesh, and that's the environment. You know, the chemicals from the garment industry, the hazardous waste cleansing is so lousy that if it continues like this, we can have as many fires as we want. The actual problem will then that Bangladesh will have no clean groundwater in 20 years from now.
Thank you very much, Gunilla. I just had a
So
very
the environment is important.
5-minute sign waved at me from the front, so I have to. So we've got a large number of questions. We're just going to hop round. Trade union capability. It's got to be you, hasn't it? We had a question from the lady halfway back about what about improving the capability of local trade unions on the ground.
Yes.
Yes.
That's essential, and we are doing it.
Very good. So she'll get back. 6 months? Come back and tell us in 6 months? Okay, sure. Very good indeed. Right, I'm just going to go to you. Yes.
A very important point that she made about political affiliation.
Yes. Yes.
I think that we need to address, because the thing is, so many things are politicized. Everything in Bangladesh is politicized at every level. So we need to address this, because this is the fear of the basically people from our position, that the politicization of trades union can really harm this industry in a massive way.
Thanks very much, Shafiq. And you're going to go back?
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And so we have all of the unions that are affiliated to us form an industrial Bangladesh council, which focuses its work on organising and collective bargaining. They can leave their political differences outside the door.
So,
well, that's a longer conversation.
Okay, that is a longer conversation, but thank you for raising that, because it is one of the very biggest issues. Can I just go to you for some comments on purchasing practices? Adil from Next. You knew that was going to happen. And you can answer on Pakistan as well if you'd like.
About purchasing practices. I think, okay, it's a white elephant in the room. Purchasing practices, absolutely. You know what? There's no point in doing 99% of the stuff we do unless we actually deal with that, with the issue of purchase practices, to be able to ensure that, I'm going to say this, the fact is in the last, 5 years, wages have gone down by 25%, working hours have gone up by 25%, and that is driven by, to be honest, it comes from the consumers as well, and it's you guys as well, you're all consumers, we're consumers, etc. And, the fact is if you walk down the street and you see 3 T-shirts for £1, then, and an alarm bell doesn't ring in your head, then I'm telling you, something's wrong. Because, the fact that, honestly, right now you can go down and find, somewhere 3 T-shirts for £2, whatever, etc. They've got to ship it over, they've got to make it, they've got to get the cotton, they've got to take a cut, they've got to take a cut, we got to make some money, whatever. The only people who get squeezed and hammered are the workers. So I'm going to link it to the actual consumers as well. The amount of power that consumers have is unbelievable. And it's great that everybody, and I'll be very honest, after the Rana Plaza, those people did more to change ethical trade than, I think the ethical trade community has done in 10 years. That's a fact. But from consumers, we're not asking you to kind of, climb a mountain, climb Mount Everest, run a marathon. All you have to do is say to the brand, actually, no, I do want to know. And it's just a question, because you are king, and the power that you have obviously drives a lot of what brands will do, what they will invest in, and how they will go forward. I know it's not nothing. Let's go out and start a revolution, but for Next, and it's going to sound like, oh, look, Next, whatever, etc. But everybody's got the code of practices, everybody's got all these labour rights, etc. There are fundamental human rights which will enable the rights of all the other ones. And Richard and everybody's touched on them. Freedom of association and wages. The trade unions, etc. are key. Not just because workers are fighting for their rights every single day, but if you give them their voice and you give them their power, they are already fighting for their rights, etc. We don't need to kind of, go there like we've done with armies of failed auditors and spend £60 billion, which is how much the auditing industry is. If we gave that money out at the gates, we'd make more difference. All we need to do now is actually give those workers not only the training, the rights, but the tools to be able to actually access social justice. And I would like to say the gender thing is massive. 80% of garment workers are women, but also the amount of violence against women, discrimination, etc., that's been going on for years, and auditors will never pick it up because they're not. But the women at the forefront is the only way we're going to make a change, not just in Bangladesh, but I think globally.
That was fantastic inputs, really, really good. Excellent. I know, Jenny, we ought to just tax you with that one about factories being shut down. And I'd like you to answer in two ways. One is about the Accord, but then also, what about the smaller factories which are outside the Accord, which might never be able to meet any standard? For example, the ones which the National Tripartite Action Plan are looking at.
Oh, okay. I don't know if I can do all of this very quickly. All right, so there are, as I've said, different kinds of unions at different levels, and as you'll see from Shafiq sitting here, there are different types of factory owners. Not all factory owners are willing to jump onto this new way of doing business, so inevitably when there's massive change needed, there is pushback. And a lot of nonsense is written in the Bangladesh press about what is happening. And this is one of the pieces of nonsense. The Accord has absolutely no power to shut down factories. This is the government's role. And we have a mechanism in place where if we find what we call a critical finding, which is a building that looks like it might fall down, our inspectors will inform the government, a review panel is called within 48 hours, and it is the government inspector that takes the decision that some or all of the factory must be shut down. To put this in context, we've inspected over 300 factories now for fire and building safety. Fire safety, there has not been any issues about having to stop production because these are all things that can be fixed up as you go. Out of all of those, some 10 factories have had issues that have caused the inspectors enough alarm to say, we've got to do something now because nobody wants to see another Rana Plaza. So the other imperative is to keep production going to the extent possible. So the first thing they do is to work out how can the factory keep going. And that's by doing a lot of things to do with load shifting, moving machinery down from higher floors to lower floors, emptying water tanks that sit on the roofs and give a lot of pressure on the buildings, doing everything possible to keep as much production going as possible. But in some cases, very tiny number, that hasn't been possible, and some workers have been not able to continue working. But as I said before, well, I don't think I said it yet, because there's a commitment in the Accord that workers will continue to receive wages. So what's been happening is that the garment factory owners, where this has been an issue, are in constant negotiations with the Accord team on the ground about how to manage this, but they're also talking to the press outside. So we've got this sort of dual thing going on where there's all these alarmist voices saying, oh, we're putting workers out of work, but the truth is, nobody wants to see another Rana Plaza, and that is the absolute top priority for absolutely everybody. So if there is a building that is found where it looks as if there's a problem, can you imagine what would happen if those workers went to work and the worst happened? So that's number one priority, safety first. Smaller factories, another misapprehension is that the Accord only covers first-tier factories. It doesn't. Any factories anywhere in the supply chain that are producing for the garment brands that have signed the Accord are covered, and we are inspecting the most critical factories first. So further down the track, we'll see less and less of these incidents. I don't want to speak for the National Action Plan because I'm not part of it, so I think if the government or anybody else can speak for that, but the challenges are enormous and it won't be changed overnight, but little by little, and I think we're on the right road.
Fantastic. Can I just ask, timekeeper, obviously coach and horses through the time, what are we allowed? Are we allowed another 3 minutes?
12 minutes.
12 minutes. Okay, well, so we're on the panel wrap up now. I think we have one question there in the middle. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Anna from a company called M4C. We are sustainability specialists based locally. This is a question, I think, for Jenny. Sorry, Jenny. But maybe also for Adil. You've talked about Alliance, Accord. I'm familiar with SADEX, ETI, etc., etc. How does all this lot link together, and how can poor, sorry, I can't remember your name, but you know, in the factory know who am I answering to? What am I supposed to be doing?
Okay, maybe I should just ask Shafiq first,
Yes,
because he's the one who sort of is at the bottom of getting all of this, and then maybe onto you two, and then we're going to just have a short closing discussion.
What's it like having all those people nagging you constantly?
No, I think something's got to give, and we got to wake up and we got to face the challenges. The changes got to be made. The most important thing out of this discussion, what I feel should happen and we should go out with, is Rana Plaza and Tazreen, you know, it cannot be in vain. You know, we have to actually stand and deliver. All of us who are stakeholders in this have to stand up and deliver so that this thing doesn't actually happen. And in terms of certain factories to be shut down, that also has to happen, because the thing is, it might sound actually cruel, but the thing is, it's got to be survival of the fittest. The better practices, businesses should become better. The people who can't manage, you know, I'm afraid they have to actually give in, because we cannot afford to have, again, anyone losing lives. You know, the point that you made about environment, and I'd like to touch on that, is again, it's a question of governance. You know, the thing is, when the army came in six years ago, and they said, okay, you know, we're going to change everything. They did their lip service for about a couple of months. They were going to make major changes, but nothing actually happened. You know, so the thing is, there are a lot of good things that are happening in Bangladesh. There are a lot of amazing factories that is happening in Bangladesh. The people thinking about zero discharge. We spent over $1.5 million on our effluent treatment plant. I got in the professor of environmental and civil engineering, the head of, to come and do a 2-year study before we did our effluent treatment plant. So a lot of things, a lot of good things are going on. Bad things actually come out. Bad things are amazing news. Good things that are actually happening are actually never reported, okay? I just like to touch one thing here on the financial side, okay? And that actually trades union are going to come and actually become a panacea and going to change everything, okay? In my factory, besides people's wages, which is mandatory, we spend about approximately 50% of our net profits on the bonuses that we share with our workers, okay? How many industry are there, okay, on the planet that does this, okay? Is this ever going to be reported? Absolutely not, you know? I mean, what I'm talking about are the net profits of the export earning. We give attendance bonus. We give a conduct bonus. We use the word conduct bonus because in 2008, the raw material prices went through the roof exponentially, okay? We actually, Bangladesh system is such, the political system is such, you can't actually afford to even pay people more. Someone's going to hound you, you know? I mean, how come these people are actually paying more, okay? They've got to be pelted, okay? Attack them, you know? How do they feed people? Attack them. If you do, you're damned. If you don't, you're damned, okay? Nearly 50% of our export profits we share with our workers, okay? It's unprecedented. We probably pay about 50% more than the local average, you know? Who is going to actually report that? Nobody actually comes and sees that so many good things are actually going on, you know? But the thing is, we've got to go out of this room thinking the Rana Plaza and Tazreen, you know, it's not in vain.
Now, I'm just going to ask actually all of you on that very note to think of what one thing will you do? Oh, excellent. Thank you very much. What one thing will you do after this meeting? And what one thing would you like somebody else to do? But before we do that, Rick, just over to you. A minute of your own thoughts, having heard everyone on the panel. Do we prove your research findings correct?
Absolutely.
Are you going to say that?
No, this has been really terrific because I think it has fleshed out with great detail the complexities of this issue and how, again, no one actor can solve it. We need different actors. We need industry, we need government, we need unions, we need civil society groups, and we need the buyers and suppliers as well. So I think that that's key. I guess I'd have two reflections, really. The first is we need to take seriously the purchasing practices, the downstream. We talked about pricing, lead times, batch size, things like that, and how to transform that. And a couple of people have raised this issue about ethical sourcing, ethical consumption, certification mechanisms, et cetera. And I think that there's two ways to go with that. One is we have to somehow translate this movement, which is if you buy more or pay more of a good that supposedly is certified or ethically sourced, that you've kind of done your duty. Right? We've gone to Starbucks, we bought our cup of coffee that's shade grown, organic, fair trade certified, et cetera, and now we've done our part. I think what we have to do is translate that into a movement that actually asks consumers, do we really need the 2 or 3 t-shirts at a very low price, and do we need to have consumption patterns like that? Or could we have fewer things and pay more for it, understanding that that might drive behaviors in a very, very different way? I think it's very difficult to mobilize millions and millions of individual consumers to do that, but it's much less difficult to mobilize institutional consumers, like universities, like churches, like local governments. And we already see movements in the United States, at least the university licensing movement is trying to drive that. So I think that we can't take ourselves off the hook. We have to actually think hard about what are we as consumers, either as individuals or as members of institutional consumers, what can we do? So that's, I think, one thing we should do. I think if there's one thing I'd like to see done, I think that this is a tremendous opportunity for the government of Bangladesh. And it can take this opportunity to basically say, we really see all these crises, we know that part of it's our doing, part of it's externally driven, et cetera, but we can turn this around and make this a place that is competitive in the ready-made garment sector, but also ethically, environmentally sound and labor sound. In the same way that, remember how Cambodia, which has had some tarnish recently, but how Cambodia turned itself around and it became the place that people were willing to pay more for because of better work or the earlier thing. There's some problems with the Cambodian experience, but just think about how all the sourcing was willing to stay there. Can Bangladesh do something that's more serious than what was going on in Cambodia and take advantage of this moment? If it did that, I think this could allow it to hold on to this sector and not be the latest victim where sourcing will eventually go to a cheaper place that's maybe even less risk.
Thank you. That was concise, elegant, and interesting, which is great. Now, Adil, what about you? Are you going to be concise, elegant, and interesting? What are you going to do?
I think.
And what do you want another could be any of the stakeholders that you have here?
I think in a nutshell, it's increase and maintain the support of the Accord. I think having key players, key strategic players, etc. And if you're going to make a change, you've got to have government, you've got to have trade unions, and you've got to have the brands. And I think, if you've got those elements together, and as the Accord, as Jenny pointed out, there are requirements from all, and it's formal, and there's 164, but you have to do it collaboratively. I would just say as well that, the difference with the Accord as well is it just doesn't rely on the goodwill of the nice factories. That's why the Accord is so important, because it will ensure that there is worker management, it will ensure that there is freedom of association, but it's not a favour. These are these are fundamental rights that the workers shouldn't be kind of say, oh, you can have this right, because no, it's your fundamental human right. But again, and I would just really reiterate what Richard just said as well, it's not just an opportunity for Bangladesh as well. I think it's an opportunity for Bangladesh to set a standard that we can then scale up and use globally as well, and hopefully change, to be honest with you, millions of lives. Because if we can do it once with the Accord, then we, and with your help, we can push for it to happen in lots of other places. But it has to be with all of us pushing for it.
So This is Bangladesh at the leading edge. Yeah, fantastic. Jenny, what are you going to do and what are you going to have done? And you can't have ones that people have said before. That's gonna be hard.
I was just going to agree with that. But in a little more specific, because I think what that happened in Bangladesh was an absolute tragedy, and the fact that we got the accord out of it, we are duty bound to make the most of this opportunity, not only in Bangladesh, because what the accord shows us is it is possible to find another way of doing things. And I think this sort of partially answers the very last question, which we didn't get to, which was, what about all of these initiatives all over the place? There are initiatives all over the place, and factory owners, they are inundated with, if you've got more than one supplier, then they're all going to have their different requirements. So you go to a factory and they've got the next code of conduct, the H&M code of conduct, and they're all different and they have to all do the different boxes. That is rubbish. And what this shows us is that we can all work together. We can have industry-wide reform, which doesn't rely on one factory or part of a factory changing. It requires on everybody working together. And I think this is what the brands are learning, that they can't do it on their own and they can't do it unilaterally as brands. The government has to be there, the unions have to be there, and they have to bring their suppliers to the table so that it is a level playing field for everybody. And so what our challenge is as a trade union is to work with the brands to spread this model to other countries, not only on safety, but on wages, because we can't bring up wages factory by factory. We can only bring them up industry-wide, and a lot of the mechanisms for that to happen don't exist, have never been created. We need to create them, and that's what we're going to be doing.
Thank you. Inspiring stuff. Now, what about you? What are you going to do, or what do you want someone else to do?
I would like to request, please, buying more garments from Bangladesh, and let's do together better for our workers, and let's do together our governments, our workers, brand wired everywhere. Don't shut down the workers. Ultimately, our workers losing their job. Ultimately, their family would be died. So let's do together better for our garments workers.
Fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Passionate stuff, and very elegantly expressed, if I may say so. Shafiq, now.
Okay, what I'd like to do, I'd like to actually build more strategic partnership with retailers around the globe to become better and stronger and deliver on all fronts. The other thing, what I'd like someone else to do is for Bangladesh government to take the leadership, to give vision, to have a rudder so that Bangladesh can actually create a garment revolution for its future.
Shafiq, thank you. Panel, thank you very much indeed. Stephanie, I'd like to hand back to you, I think.
Thank you very much. I will stand here now because the live stream was affected. I'm very sorry for the disruption earlier. We had somebody who fainted. She's okay. She's been taken to hospital for observation. So just to let you know that she's okay. But obviously we had to put her health first before we could resume. I would really like to thank everybody who's been involved, especially, firstly, Professor Richard Locke for his fascinating presentation at the beginning. I think he set up a really, really interesting panel discussion. So I would like to thank all the panelists for making some really frank observations, and I think really bringing to the fore that these are complex issues. And I would especially like to thank Rosie Hurst for facilitating that discussion, because the key for, I think, message from this evening that I would take away, and I hope everybody will take away, is that all actors have to work together, and that isn't always easy because people have different views and represent different interests. But if we can work together, we want to see both a thriving garment industry and better workers' conditions and better workers' rights, and that those are fundamental. And so hopefully this debate will contribute to that discussion. Before we finish, we have two more people who are going to give just short, say a few words. Firstly, I would like to introduce, I'll introduce them both, and then one will come up and then the other will come up. Firstly, I would like to introduce Mr. Zoki Ahad, who's the Assistant High Commissioner for Bangladesh, who's been with us. We've heard a lot about government. And then following him, Julian Skyme, who's the Director of Social Responsibility at the University of Manchester. And it was the social responsibility at the University of Manchester that supported this event and bringing this fascinating panel together. And finally, I would like to thank all the participants, both those who are in the audience here and those who've come in through live stream and made their contributions. So I'll pass now over to Mr.
We can trade.
We'll trade places.
All right.
Yes, you have to come in. Oh, yes.
All right. Come on. Why leaving me? Well, thank you very much for this opportunity and for this wonderful gathering. First of all, I would like to say that the garments revolution has already started, and it started in Bangladesh. And I would like to let you know that what our government is doing for the last 1 year is a relentless effort, a tremendous work to comply with all the requirements of ILO. We are on the right track, and I believe, I hope, I absolutely believe by my heart that in the near future we will comply all the requirements. And regarding the topic, whether buying with a conscience garments made in Bangladesh, what is the problem? I don't see any problem. It's a competitive world, competitive market. The economy will take you there, and we are there to provide you with quality goods as entrepreneurs like my brother is providing you clothing which are very quality and very reasonable price than any other countries of the world. Why not buy from Bangladesh then? It's a small country of 55,000 square miles with 160 million people. Can you imagine? And we are keeping the growth rate of 6%, on an average 6%. It's a huge task. Even during the global recession, we maintained it, despite many other, not to mention the names, European or other countries. Regarding Rana Plaza, it's a disaster. I fully agree. On behalf of my government, I would like to express our absolute sorrow for the victims who died in that incident and who lost their working ability. But the government is trying to do utmost for them, though maybe to some of you not up to the mark, but our government is trying its level best, that I can assure you. Rana Plaza's issue, we believe, the government believe, is not only a garments issue. It's an accident. It's a collapse of a building which took more than 1,000 lives. It may happen anywhere. It may happen in a school. It may happen in a train station. It may happen in any other buildings. Why don't we talk about other things? I'm sorry if I hurt someone, please don't take it otherwise. There's so many buildings collapsing in the world. There are other offices in those buildings. We are not talking about those. The other day, a helicopter crashed on a pub. Have we stopped going to the pub, or have we stopped using the helicopters? The other day, a ship sank. Did we stop using ships? No. The train accident in Spain the other day for overspeed. There are so many things happening, so many accidents taking place in the world. It's one of them. We are very sorry for that. We are extremely sorry for that. We wish it never happens anywhere in the world. Regarding governance and the question of government cannot do anything, regarding accountability, I would like to say that nothing is perfect. we are trying our level best to accomplish all this. I'm not claiming that we have all, but we are trying. We are trying to reach the goal. As my brother rightfully mentioned, that we have already achieved many of the Millennium Development Goals. So in this regard as well, we are trying our level best, and inshallah, God willing, we will reach our target. If you pay more for a product, you can expect better quality. At the same time, at the back of the screen, the producer, I'm not actually that much used to with the jargons, so please excuse me if I say something like, which is not correct. So the producer is also getting money. How much profit you are showing in your balance sheet, the amount you are showing, from that you can count your gross profit and net profit. And from that profit, my brother is spending at least 50% for the well-being of his workers. It's remarkable. I salute you. But this mentality has to be within all the producers, and it will be coming. I can assure you, because the world is changing, our mentality is changing, and the mentality not only of Bangladesh, of the subcontinent, is changing as a whole. If I may say, the Bangladesh Government's Manufacturers and Exporters Association, BGMEA, is a big organization of the government owners. They have a huge building. May I politely ask you, brother, is that building in the right place? Does it have the right permission to do that? I'm not asking you personally, it's my question. We have this type of things. This type of problems we have in Bangladesh, I admit, but it doesn't mean that our development partners will leave us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I realise it's just me left between you and a cold glass of wine or water, so I promise to be really brief. I'm Julian Skirman. I'm the Director of Social Responsibility at the university. Many of my colleagues will know this university has just 3 goals: world-class research, outstanding teaching, and thirdly, social responsibility. And that social responsibility work aims to ensure that our research, our teaching, our own operational activities as an organisation, our engagement work contributes positively to society, to the economy, to culture, and to the environment. And with regard to the research at the University of Manchester, we're determined that our knowledge and expertise is used to find solutions to some of the major challenges of the 21st century. I think tonight's example is a really good one of one of the major intractable issues of the 21st century, that of global production and consumption, and the ability of consumption and production to produce fair outcomes for many of society's least advantaged groups. This is, of course, as Stephanie said, a very important topic to this city, which is the home of the global textile industry, and also the laboratory for Marx and Engels and the birthplace of modern industrial capitalism. I think one of Richard's compatriots, I'm looking for Richard, so one of Richard's compatriots, a former president of Princeton and Michigan universities, Harold Shapiro, he said something very profound, I think, about universities, and he said they serve society, universities do, as a responsible servant and a thoughtful critic. And the ability of universities, I think, to stand outside any form of particular interest group is something, particularly with a highly nuanced and complex area like tonight, is a vital function that universities play in this debate. And I think, Richard, your research and your presentation today provides a paradigm example of this, and I wanted to thank you for coming to Manchester and undertaking a fantastic presentation. Also, our chair and the organiser for today, Stephanie. Stephanie, I think, is one of a large number of staff, but she's a fantastic example of somebody, I think, who can produce some of these thoughtful critics of current socio-economic arrangements, but also do this in a way that engages constructively in partnership with a range of practical actors who have the ability to translate some of the academic research in universities into practical outcomes which can address major inequalities in society. And Stephanie is a preeminent researcher herself in this field and didn't choose to take the panel, but is obviously a very important academic at the university, who's really at the forefront of researching issues in this area, both in the Brooksville Poverty Institute and in the Institute of Development and Policy Management Studies. So I think that's something it's very important. So I'd like to thank Stephanie for organising tonight's event, but also to thank her for bringing along, and I think that typifies the work that Stephanie and other colleagues in the university are doing, as being an engaged university and bringing in all of our partners here tonight, which made today such a fantastic event, as I'm sure you'll agree. Finally, I'd like to thank Mr. Ahad, the Assistant High Commissioner for Bangladesh, for attending tonight in I'm sure what's a very busy schedule for you. I hope you can see how engaged this university is in addressing issues around the responsible development of Bangladesh, a country, of course, in Manchester we have very important historical ties. So thank you very much for coming tonight. I hope you've enjoyed tonight's event, and I hope you now can take some time to get a cold drink. Thanks very much.